Hey guys, welcome to A Taste for Life and to today's Chronicles of the Wards. This is why you're on a waiting list. Now, if you are an eating disorder patient and have ever tried to access inpatient care but have found yourself on a waiting list or just being rejected altogether, you're going to want to listen to this story because this is a prime example of why this is happening or has happened to you. So here's the context. I was in the hospital system for my eating disorder between the years of 2013 and 2021. And this story takes place in 2019. And in 2019, I spent more time in the inpatient setting than I did out in the community. And it was the second year of my 3-year consecutive time on a compulsory treatment order. So basically, anytime I was made inpatient and then discharged off the ward, I would automatically be admitted into what's called the monitoring outpatient clinic. And in this clinic, I was obligated to present myself back into the hospital so they could check like physical parameters such as like weight, bloods, blood sugar levels, blood pressure, my temperature and my heart rate. And I would have to do that once fortnightly or once weekly. And at this point in this story, it was once weekly so that they could just check that I was physically okay. So during my time in the hospital system for my eating disorder, but more prevalently during 2019, the trend would be that I would be admitted into hospital for anywhere between a couple of weeks to a few months, and then I would be discharged. I'd be out in the community for between 1 to 2 weeks, and then through monitoring clinic and something that has come up there, I would be readmitted back into inpatient care. So you can see I really had very limited time in the community. Now, prior to this point, I had already been in the hospital system for my eating disorder for years, and that was without any successful outcomes or even just a slight inkling of progress. In fact, it was quite the opposite, and it was taking a really big toll on me and my overall well-being, being physically, emotionally, and mentally. So my family and I were actively trying to get me off this compulsory treatment order just to stop this cycle of readmissions. So you can probably see how this becomes an issue for the patient themselves, because being in a space that feels very traumatic for you and is very distressing for you doesn't lead to any positive changes. But when you are put in the system and frequently held in inpatient so often, it skewers your reality a little bit. And it kind of makes you feel like there is no way out of this perpetual cycle and that you are going to be stuck in it forever. So not only is it deflating me, it's also squashing any possibility of finding an external source to motivate me to change at all anyway. But even aside from that, you can see how this is an even broader issue, because patients who are trying to access inpatient treatment and who are being rejected or who are being waitlisted, who may be deemed not as critically ill or who are presenting atypically, really don't stand a chance into getting into the system when it seems to really be just this revolving door of the same people coming in and out of inpatient care. So the story I'm telling today is the perfect example of what I am talking about. So it was back in 2019 and I had just been made inpatient and was leaving the inpatient facility, getting discharged, and was expected to continue in monitoring clinic as an outpatient every single week. But because the week that I was being discharged fell on a public holiday or there was something else happening, I was expected to come back in a week and a half instead of the regular 7-day period. So in this 1.5 week period, I unfortunately became unwell and developed or caught some kind of bug, which led to a suppression of appetite. And really for about a week of that week and a half, I did nothing but lay on the couch. So I was in a very immobile state and I wasn't doing so well. But by the time it got to the end of that week and a half, I was feeling a lot better and only had like residual symptoms. So the weight loss being one of them, maybe a bit of a sniffly nose. But apart from that, I had brunted the front of this illness and was feeling a lot better. Now, I am not going to lie or sugarcoat this. What would usually happen when I was discharged from hospital was that I would lose weight. Now, a lot of this had to do with the fact that I was not in a recovery space, so I wasn't really trying to maintain or gain weight. But it's also due to the fact that when you look at the weight that I was putting on in hospital, it was so rapidly and over such a short span of time, like in comparison to what would normally happen in the community to a regular person or to someone in a normal body, that a lot of the time the weight that I was gaining in there was not true weight. It would be fluid changes, it would be hormone imbalances, it would be things of that nature that's contributing to a higher number on the scale. But at the end of the day, there was no way that I was genuinely putting on that amount of weight in that period of time. And so what would happen is, as soon as I'm discharged and I'm not following the meal plan to a T, the weight would come off just as quickly as it was put on. Now, in this particular story, it happened even more dramatically than usual because I was not following any kind of meal plan. I was too unwell to try any attempt at eating or anything like that. But there was a very dramatic weight drop, and I can't deny that. So Obviously, I was very apprehensive about the fact that I had lost that much weight in that amount of time, and I knew that it would at minimum be frowned upon when I presented at monitoring clinic. But I also knew that it was very different circumstances this time and that my illness led me to that amount of weight loss. So for this particular week, I decided to bring my mum along to monitoring clinic just so she could back up the fact that I was genuinely unwell. And like I said, I still had a few of the symptoms, so they probably would have been able to tell just by hearing me speak or seeing me or whatever. But I did want someone to just reiterate the fact that this dramatic amount of weight loss was more due to the fact that I was unwell during that 1.5 weeks time. And so my mum accompanied me to this appointment, explained what had happened, I explained what had happened, but regardless, it was decided that I would be put back onto the inpatient ward. Now, there was no bed at the time for me on the inpatient ward. And usually what would happen, and had happened prior to this story and after this story, was that if they wanted to make me inpatient, but there was no bed available, they would send me to medical or to short stay, and I would stay within the hospital until the bed became available. But on this particular occasion, they decided that I could come home and then in a week's time, I would come back and be admitted for my admission. Now, that kind of goes to show how uncritical the situation was, because in any other case, they would have put me on medical, but they were allowing me to go home and come back later, which I was very thankful for, because the less amount of time in hospital, the better. And I think that's probably why they did it, even though they never did it again. But, you know, I was thankful for the fact that I got to go home. And this is the first and only time that I decided, you know what? I need to prevent this admission from happening. So I went home, I got myself back onto a meal plan, and I regained back every gram I lost from the time that I was unwell to the time I went to monitoring clinic, and was back at the weight that I was discharged at. Now, did it mean that I was necessarily going to stay at that weight? Probably not, to be honest, but I would have lost it a little bit slower to prevent it from being this dramatic, and it wouldn't have led to a hospital admission in any other circumstance. So that was kind of my aim. And I know that's not recovery focused and all that kind of stuff, but I was not in a space of recovery. So the Thursday rolls up and I present back into monitoring clinic so that they can process me into the inpatient facility. But I don't bring any luggage, and I bring along my mum and my dad this time, just so they are aware of how hard I tried to avoid this admission. And just so they know that I really did the work and I stuck to a meal plan, and that's how I gained all the weight back. And this was met with nothing but suspicion and accusations from my treating team, which, given my history, I understand a little bit, but at that same time was super invalidating and also just humiliating, because what they were saying was there is no way you've gained back all that weight without doing something dodgy. And I was humiliated because I really put in the effort, and they were basically saying that I shouldn't have put on weight that quickly. And as I pointed out before, it's very likely and plausible that I would put that weight back on as rapidly as I did, because none of it was genuine weight. None of it was true weight. And I really, for such a long time, had no idea what my weight was going to do and how it was going to react, whether that be losing weight or putting on weight, nor did they, because of the amount of time I was in and out and all these fluctuations that were so dramatic. None of it was true or good evidence that we could use to find out what my body was actually doing. So despite my mum and dad vouching for me, the team still did not trust that I had done this genuinely, so they decided to bladder scan me just to check if I was water loading, which proved that I did not water load and that I had just gained the weight back. But they still decided to admit me, and from what I recall, I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks after that inpatient, when really, there was absolutely no need. My weight was back to normal. All my other physical parameters had maintained their good stance, and I was so mad that entire 3 weeks. So if this story does not tell you why there are no beds available for those who are seeking it or wanting it, I don't know what will. To those people who are being forced into treatment and who are in this reoccurring cycle of admissions, I am truly very sorry. But also to those people who are trying to access that inpatient care and are just being waitlisted or being rejected altogether, I am very sorry that we are in a system where people like me who are being forced into treatment cannot make the decision to remove themselves from that situation, to sacrifice their place for someone who is genuinely wanting and going to use the resources as they should be used. Now, I'm not saying that inpatient is going to be very helpful, and it may not be exactly what you were expecting, but if that is what you were wanting to try in your eating disorder journey, then you have every right and should be allowed to access that level of care. But to me, it makes a lot more sense to share the resources. So I'm not saying I shouldn't have been inpatient whatsoever. I should be inpatient when it is really critically needed, and I guess for the beginning of my inpatient cycles, you need to give it a chance and trial and see if it's going to work for you. But for me, who was having admission after admission and it was proven not to work, I am truly, genuinely sorry for those people who want access to it, and it's almost being wasted on people like me who are trying to get out of the system. And I think if we could share that resource a little bit better, it may lead to better incomes in the eating disorder community overall. Because let me tell you, one thing that happened was that when I was finally ready to access and engage in recovery care, I was no longer willing to go inpatient. I was not able to get the care that I needed because I had been traumatized to the point that I wanted to avoid it at all costs, even when I was ready to recover. So it shouldn't be getting to that point for anyone, and people shouldn't be getting turned away left, right, and center when there could be just a slightly better running of the system in allocating spots for people who need eating disorder inpatient treatment. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any similar experiences or have experienced being turned away from inpatient care because you've been waitlisted or rejected, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Otherwise, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.